What did ancient humans do when someone snored? That's a real question, not a joke. Because if you picture a group of 30 people sleeping in the same cave, on the same floor, sharing the same air, and one of them is the kind of snorer who can be heard from the other side of the shelter, you have a problem. Not an abstract problem, a survival problem. Sleep deprivation in the ancient world wasn't the productivity inconvenience it is today. A hunter who hasn't slept can't track. A forager who hasn't slept makes dangerous mistakes. A parent who hasn't slept can't protect their child. The stakes of a bad night in a cave were categorically different from the stakes of a bad night in a bedroom with a noise machine and blackout curtains. And yet humans slept communally for almost all of their evolutionary history. In groups, in close quarters, with other people's bodies, breathing, and, yes, snoring, all around them. So, what happened? And what does the answer tell you about the sleep problem you might be sitting with right now? Here's the part that reframes the whole question. The 2017 Hadza sleep study, the one that found only 18 minutes of simultaneous sleep across the entire group over 20 days, wasn't just measuring when people slept. It was measuring the structure of sleep in a communal context. And what it found was that communal sleep is not the same as individual sleep stacked on top of other individual sleep. It is a different system. In a communal sleeping environment, sound, movement, and presence are continuous. Someone shifts position, someone coughs, someone feeds an infant, someone, yes, snores. And the people around them don't necessarily wake up fully. They enter a lighter sleep stage, they may semi-consciously register the sound, and they drift back. This is not insomnia. This is the normal, expected baseline of human sleep in the environment humans actually evolved in. Your brain was not built for silence. It was built for the ambient noise of other people. So why does that matter for the problem you might have right now? Here's the finding that puts modern sleep problems in a different frame. Jerome Siegel's research team, which produced the Hadza sleep study, also analyzed what the Hadza woke up to. The answer was not silence. It was other people. Ambient social sound, breathing, movement, the low background presence of other humans was continuous throughout the night. The Hadza didn't sleep in quiet. They slept in the acoustic presence of their group. Siegel's team proposed that this ambient social presence may actually be part of the regulatory environment for human sleep, that the nervous system uses social sound as a signal that the environment is safe enough for sleep to deepen. Silence in this framing is not the optimal sleep environment. It is an evolutionarily novel one. The absence of other people's sounds is a relatively new feature of human sleep, and for a significant number of people, it may be part of what makes sleep hard. Which raises the obvious question: what exactly did the snoring do, and was it always a problem? If your brain won't let this go, that means it's doing its job. Subscribe so you catch the next one. Ugg hasn't slept well in 30,000 years, and he's finally getting answers. Snoring is not a modern condition. It is a predictable consequence of human upper airway anatomy, combined with the sleeping posture of deep sleep, and it would have been present in every human group throughout evolutionary history. The anatomy is specific. During deep sleep, the muscles of the upper airway, the tongue, soft palate, and throat relax. In some individuals, this relaxation is sufficient to partially occlude the airway, causing the tissues to vibrate with each breath. The sound of that vibration is snoring. It is more common in males, in individuals with certain body fat distributions around the neck, in people sleeping on their backs, and it increases with age as airway muscle tone naturally declines. In a group sleeping on a cave floor or a hide surface, back sleeping was likely common, the most comfortable position on a flat surface. The conditions for snoring were structurally present. What ancient humans almost certainly did not have was a social and cultural framework that treated snoring as an individual's problem to be managed in private. Communal sleep means communal solutions. Ethnographic evidence from cultures that still practice communal sleep consistently shows that sound disturbances, snoring, infant crying, restless sleeping, are managed socially, nudging the person, repositioning them, moving sleeping positions, or simply tolerating it as background noise in the way that people who live near a busy street eventually stop hearing the traffic. Here's what the communal sleep context provided that individual bedroom sleep doesn't. Natural positional cues. A person sleeping next to you who is snoring gets a touch, a nudge, a repositioning, almost automatically, without a separate social negotiation. In a communal sleep environment, the human proximity that was universal means that the people around you are both the cause of some disturbance and the automatic corrective mechanism for it. The ancient solution to snoring was not a specialist device ordered from a late-night infomercial. It was the person sleeping next to you giving you a shove. This technology remains available. Its adoption has declined dramatically. But here's the deeper biological story underneath the social one. Because snoring in its severe form is not just a noise problem. It is a symptom of a condition that ancient humans would have experienced, managed imperfectly, and possibly died from at elevated rates without ever knowing what it was. Obstructive sleep apnea, the condition where airway collapse during sleep is sufficient to repeatedly interrupt breathing, causes measurable drops in blood oxygen, repeated microarousals that fragment sleep architecture, elevated cortisol and cardiovascular strain over time, and cognitive impairment in waking hours. It is associated with increased cardiovascular disease risk, metabolic dysfunction, and reduced life expectancy. It is also far more common in modern populations than it would have been in ancient ones, for a specific reason. Obstructive sleep apnea is strongly correlated with body fat distribution around the neck and upper airway, and with jaw and airway anatomy that has shifted in the agricultural period. Skull analyses comparing pre- and post-agricultural populations show a measurable reduction in jaw size and change in facial geometry that corresponds to softer, less mechanically demanding diets. The jaw that chewed tough, varied foods for 100,000 years is larger and differently shaped than the jaw that grew up on soft, processed foods. The ancient snorer was probably snoring against the backdrop of better airway anatomy, on average, than the modern one. Here's the sleep fragmentation finding that changes the picture entirely. Modern sleep science treats sleep as something that should be uninterrupted. 8 hours, 1 block. Any waking is a problem. The metrics in sleep research, sleep efficiency, wake after sleep onset, are built on the assumption that fragmentation is pathological. But the Hadza study didn't show uninterrupted sleep. It showed a pattern of light and deep sleep cycling, with partial wakings and resettlings, in a context of ambient social noise. And the Hadza, despite this pattern, showed none of the chronic sleep deprivation markers that the same fragmentation pattern produces in modern subjects studied in sleep labs. The difference may be context. Fragmentation in a socially safe, ambient sound environment may not register the same way neurologically as fragmentation in a silent, isolated room where every waking feels like a failure. The brain knows the difference between being woken by a person and being woken by silence. This brings us to the part that is most directly relevant to anyone who shares a bed or a room with someone whose sleep disturbs theirs. And it requires stepping back from the individual solution frame entirely. Modern sleep culture is intensely individualized. You have your side of the bed, your pillow, your preferred temperature, your noise sensitivity, your need for darkness. Sleep is treated as a personal biological event that requires private, controlled conditions. Disturbance by another person's sleep behavior is treated as their problem to fix, or as a reason to sleep separately. This framing is historically very recent, and the consequences of it may be more significant than they appear. Research by Wendy Troxel at Rand Corporation on couples' sleep found a complex and counterintuitive picture. Couples who sleep together, despite mutual disturbance, show better self-reported sleep quality and health outcomes than individuals who sleep alone. The presence of a trusted other person, even one whose sleep behavior is not perfect, appears to provide a regulatory benefit that the measurable sleep fragmentation doesn't fully cancel out. The mechanism proposed is consistent with the sentinel hypothesis and the social safety signal framework. The nervous system reads the presence of a trusted person as environmental safety, which allows deeper, more restorative sleep stages to occur even in the context of some mutual disturbance. The person sleeping next to you, even if they occasionally snore, is also providing the ambient social presence that the human sleep system was calibrated to expect. Sleeping separately to escape a partner's snoring solves the noise problem. It may create a different problem: the absence of the regulatory social signal that doesn't show up in the sleep fragmentation metrics but does show up in how rested you actually feel. None of this means you should tolerate clinical-level sleep apnea in a partner without treatment. Untreated obstructive sleep apnea is a genuine medical condition with real health consequences. The ancient communal sleep context did not include CPAP machines, but it also didn't include the processed diet, sedentary lifestyle, and altered airway anatomy that make modern sleep apnea as prevalent as it is. What it does mean is that the modern solution, separate rooms, separate beds, perfect individual sleep hygiene, may be optimizing for the wrong variable. The measurable individual sleep metrics may improve. The broader regulatory environment for human sleep may simultaneously get worse. Ancient humans dealt with snoring the way they dealt with most disruptions: collectively, pragmatically, and without the expectation that sleep should be a perfect solitary experience. Nudging the snorer, changing position, tolerating the sound as background noise of a group that was alive and present. This is not a romantic idealization of cave life. It is an observation that the system human sleep evolved within was social, noisy, and imperfect, and that the body built for that system may not fully optimize in the clinical silence and isolation that modern sleep culture treats as the ideal. Step back, and snoring stops being an individual problem and starts being a window into a much larger question about what the human sleep system was actually designed for. The communal cave had snoring. It had infants crying. It had people shifting, coughing, getting up to feed the fire. It was never silent. It was never perfectly controlled. And for most of human evolutionary history, that was not a bug. It was the expected operating environment of a social species sleeping in the acoustic presence of its group. The modern bedroom, quiet, isolated, temperature-controlled, darkness-enforced, is an extraordinarily novel environment for a biological system that was not designed for it. Some people thrive in it, many don't, and they spend enormous cognitive and emotional energy managing the gap between what their sleep system expects and what they've provided. The snoring that drives you out of the bedroom may be a real problem worth addressing medically, but the silence you retreat into may be a different kind of problem, one that the sleep industry is not incentivized to mention, because the solution to it does not come in a box. Here's the one thing: if you struggle to fall asleep in silence, if your mind runs in the absence of sound, if you feel more alert alone than you do in the presence of another person, consider that you may be experiencing the absence of a regulatory input, not the presence of a sleep disorder. Try this: low-level, non-content human voice audio as a background during sleep onset. Not music, not podcasts you're following, not news. A voice that continues without requiring your attention, an audiobook playing at low volume, a recorded conversation in a language you don't speak, ambient spoken word content. Your nervous system is not looking for entertainment. It is looking for the signal that there are people nearby and that the environment is safe enough to let go. A voice in the background can sometimes approximate that signal well enough for the sleep system to settle. You don't need silence. You need the sound of people who aren't a threat. That's a very different requirement. And if the idea that communal sleep was its own kind of management system, for snoring, for anxiety, for the midnight threats that never fully go away, makes you wonder what happened when the management system broke down entirely, when the threat was coming from inside the group rather than outside it, good. Because that's exactly where this goes next. What ancient humans did when two people in the same group hated each other and had nowhere to go, that one's next.